You see, one of the biggest misconceptions men carry in relationships is this idea that love is something you do. You work hard, you protect, you provide, you plan date nights, fix problems, buy gifts. And these actions, while meaningful, are often where many men stop. They believe that because they've done so much, love should naturally be reciprocated, that if they are always available, always solving, always giving, then surely they've earned affection, loyalty, even admiration, that they've earned affection, loyalty, even admiration. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Women don't fall in love with what you do for them. They fall in love with how they feel in your presence. And those are two completely different things. At a psychological level, women, just like men, are wired to seek emotional resonance. But unlike men, who often find connection through shared activities or tangible problem solving, women are generally more attuned to the quality of emotional presence. Not just that you're physically there, not just that you're doing your best, but that you're actually with her, emotionally, energetically, relationally. She wants to feel seen without having to perform. She wants to feel heard without having to explain herself 3 times. She wants to know that you can sit with her in complexity without trying to reduce her feelings into a task that needs fixing. And this is where so many men, well-intentioned as they are, fall short, because emotional presence isn't about doing, it's about being. Being grounded, being open, being engaged, without the pressure to control or resolve. It's about looking at her not with the eyes of a man checking off a box, I did the right thing, but with the eyes of someone who actually wants to know who she is in that moment. Let's be clear. Women don't care that you brought flowers if you're emotionally unavailable the rest of the week. They don't care that you paid for dinner if you were on your phone half the time. They don't care that you solved the problem if in the process you made them feel unheard, belittled, or irrelevant. The gesture, while appreciated, becomes meaningless without presence, because presence is what anchors safety. It tells her, I see you, I'm with you, I'm not running from this moment. There's a deeper philosophical point here. Presence is ultimately about your relationship to yourself. A man who can't sit with his own emotions will never be able to sit with someone else's. And this is the paradox. Many men are out here trying to give love, but they haven't yet cultivated the inner stillness that makes real love possible. They confuse reactivity with care, solutions with empathy, effort with intimacy. But women aren't fooled. They feel the difference immediately. They feel it when you listen without interrupting, when you pause before defending, when you stay curious instead of closing off. That's presence. That's the doing that actually matters. Now, here's where it gets difficult. Presence is demanding. It asks you to hold space when you'd rather escape. It asks you to stay calm when your instinct is to shut down or argue. It asks you to feel, not just fix. And for many men, especially those raised to equate masculinity with emotional detachment, this feels like unfamiliar territory. But I'll tell you this. Mastery in relationship isn't about how much you give materially. It's about how well you attune emotionally. It's not about how loudly you show up. It's about how quietly you can hold a space where she feels safe enough to be herself. When a woman says she feels disconnected, she's not talking about logistics. She's not saying you didn't do enough. She's saying you weren't really there. And once a woman no longer feels your presence, she starts to emotionally exit, even if she stays physically present. That's how love erodes, not through lack of effort, but through lack of attunement. So if you're going to take one thing from this, remember this. It's not about what you do for her, It's about who you are with her. And if you can master that, you'll never need to guess what she wants. She'll feel it. And more importantly, so will you. There's a strange irony in modern relationships. Men often go above and beyond to impress a woman, to sweep her off her feet with bold gestures, surprise vacations, expensive gifts, dramatic declarations of love. And while these grand acts might stir excitement in the short term, they don't build emotional trust. Not in the long run. Because the truth is, what women really want and what they emotionally bond with is not intensity, it's consistency. And that's hard for a lot of men to accept. Because consistency isn't flashy. It doesn't come with applause. There's no adrenaline spike, no dopamine rush. It requires something quieter, more disciplined, and in many ways more vulnerable. It demands that you show up again and again, not just when you feel like it, not just when it benefits you, and certainly not just when you fear losing her. True connection is forged not in the occasional peak moment, but in the everyday rhythm of how you relate to her. Psychologically speaking, we are all attachment-driven beings. We don't just crave love, we crave reliability. We need to feel that the person we are investing in emotionally is someone we can count on. And for women, this becomes even more heightened in intimate relationships. The nervous system responds not to what you say, but to what you consistently do. That's what creates emotional safety, a felt sense of predictability. She wants to know that when she opens up, you won't disappear. That when life gets hard, you won't suddenly go silent. That your presence isn't conditional, but stable. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Many men confuse consistency with being boring. They assume that if they're not constantly doing something new or dramatic, they lose her interest. But that's a misunderstanding of feminine psychology. Women don't get bored from predictability in connection. They get bored when the connection is mechanical, when presence becomes routine rather than real. The key is not novelty, but depth. Can you bring fresh presence into a familiar space? Can you be engaged in the everyday, not just the exceptional? Because here's the thing. Anyone can show up for a highlight moment. Anyone can post a picture-perfect anniversary dinner or surprise date. But how do you show up on a random Tuesday when she's overwhelmed and tired? How do you relate to her after an argument when things are messy and unresolved? How do you hold her, not just physically, but emotionally, when she's unsure of herself or when you're unsure of each other? Consistency isn't about being robotic. It's about showing up in a stable and emotionally attuned way. It's about staying responsive even when it's inconvenient. About listening with the same depth, whether it's a crisis or a casual conversation. And most importantly, it's about revealing yourself consistently. 2, not disappearing into your own silence when things get difficult, but learning to stay present even in discomfort. Philosophically, consistency is a form of devotion, not to the other person alone, but to the integrity of the relationship. It's saying, I will keep tending to this, not just when I'm in the mood, but because I value what we're creating. And that's a deeper kind of love, one that transcends impulse, fantasy, or performance. One that says, I am reliable, not just for you, but within myself. And let's not forget, many women have been conditioned to expect inconsistency to prepare themselves for the eventual withdrawal. They've learned, sometimes painfully, that intensity can be intoxicating but also unpredictable. So when a man shows up with steady presence, not just once but over time, it disarms her. It allows her to exhale, to trust, to open. Because in that consistency, she begins to feel that she's not just being chased, she's being held. So if you're trying to build something meaningful, remember this. Consistency is not the enemy of passion. Passion is the container for it. Grand gestures may win her attention, but only consistency earns her trust. And once you have that, you won't need to impress her. She'll feel secure enough to meet you fully. And that, more than anything, is where real intimacy begins. One of the most misunderstood dynamics in modern relationships is the idea of leadership. In particular, what it means for a man to lead, not from a place of dominance or ego, but from depth, self-possession, and emotional clarity. A kind of leadership that isn't about control, but about direction. Women aren't looking to be dominated. They're looking for a man who knows who he is, where he's going, and can hold his ground without becoming rigid or reactive. This is a subtle but powerful distinction. Because there's a narrative, often rooted in outdated gender norms, that suggest masculinity must assert itself by taking charge, by being the loudest voice in the room, by overriding disagreement. That's not leadership. That's insecurity in disguise. True leadership, especially in a relationship, begins with a man's ability to lead himself, his emotions, his impulses, his inner world, and from that place of internal order, he becomes someone she can trust, not just to make decisions, but to hold space when things become uncertain or emotionally charged. What many women are deeply craving is not a man who takes control of them, but a man who can remain centered when everything around them is in flux. This kind of grounded presence is magnetic. It communicates, I am not easily thrown off course. I can hold tension without collapsing. I can stand in disagreement without needing to win. That's what makes a woman feel safe, not because she's being overpowered, but because she's being met by someone who isn't afraid of the emotional terrain. And let's be clear, emotional leadership is not about being stoic or emotionally unavailable. It's not the absence of feeling. In fact, it's the opposite. It's the presence of feeling, fully experienced but not projected. It's the ability to say, I feel anger without using it as a weapon. I feel sadness without making her responsible for it. It's emotional intelligence with a spine, the kind of strength that doesn't demand submission, but invites trust. Because here's the truth. In any relationship, someone will lead, not because of power, but because of energy. And if you're not leading from a centered, self-aware place, you will either become passive and resentful, or controlling and unstable. Neither invites respect. Neither creates polarity. Polarity, the essential tension that keeps desire alive, relies on this masculine presence that is both firm and flexible. It's philosophical too. If you look at ancient wisdom traditions, from Taoism to Jungian psychology, there's a recurring theme. The masculine energy is that of structure, purpose, and direction. It is not domination, it is orientation. And when a man embodies that orientation in his life, when he moves with clarity and intention, a woman doesn't need to be told to follow. She chooses to move with him because it feels good to be near that kind of certainty. Not certainty about her, but certainty about himself. And that's the key. When you're leading from a place of genuine self-possession, you're not leading her. You're simply being in such a way that she feels safe, turned on, and emotionally free in your presence. That's the paradox of masculine leadership. It creates more space for her, not less. It doesn't confine her. It liberates her to soften, to open, to express, without feeling like she has to take control because you won't. Because here's the reality. When a woman feels like she has to take the lead all the time, emotionally, practically, relationally, it drains her. It hardens her. It puts her in a state of constant vigilance. And over time, that vigilance becomes resentment. Not because she doesn't want to be strong, but because she doesn't want to have to be stronger than you to keep the relationship afloat. So if you want to be a man she trusts, not just admires, but trusts, start by leading yourself. Get clear on your values. Get disciplined with your emotions. Be the calm in the storm, not the storm she has to calm. And remember, leadership is not about who's louder. It's about who's more rooted. When you embody that kind of presence, you don't need to take control. She'll feel safe enough to let go. And that's when connection becomes effortless, because it's no longer a power struggle. It's a dance. There's a quiet frustration that lives in many relationships, and it usually sounds like this. After everything I've done for her, how can she still be distant? It's the voice of a man who has invested, who has provided, who has given. He's shown up, sacrificed, stayed loyal. And yet, she feels disconnected, ungrateful, maybe even uninterested. But what he's missing is the deeper truth. That love isn't transaction, that doing things for her isn't the same as being fully with her. And more importantly, that women don't want to feel indebted to you, they want to feel chosen by you. It's a fundamental misunderstanding. Many men are taught to express love through service, fixing, providing, sacrificing. And while those acts can be beautiful, they can also become bargaining chips if they're rooted in expectation rather than desire. She didn't ask for the world, she asked for you, for your presence, your attention, your desire to choose her, not your obligation to keep her. And that distinction matters, because obligation is heavy, it's silent but suffocating. It makes a woman feel like she's part of a transaction, not a relationship. You give and you expect something in return: appreciation, affection, loyalty, sex. And if it doesn't come, you feel resentful, or worse, betrayed. But here's the truth. Love, when it's offered with strings, loses its power. It becomes a form of control, even if it's disguised as kindness. What most women are deeply attuned to is the intention behind your actions. They can sense whether your affection is driven by genuine connection or by a subconscious hope to earn validation, loyalty, or praise. And they respond accordingly. If it feels transactional, she will pull away. Not because she's ungrateful, but because she feels unseen as a person. She becomes a role you're performing for, not a partner you're relating to. Psychologically, this speaks to the deeper human need to be chosen freely. We all want to feel that we are loved, not because someone has to love us, but because they want to. The moment love becomes something owed, it ceases to feel like love. And women in particular are sensitive to this nuance. They don't want to feel like they are the recipient of your duty. They want to feel like they are the object of your enthusiasm, your intention, your attention. And when that's missing, when everything you do is tinged with an unspoken demand to be rewarded or appreciated, it changes the emotional landscape. She feels pressure, she feels judged, and worst of all, she begins to question whether your love is truly for her, or simply for the version of her that reflects your efforts back to you. It's philosophical too, because to truly love someone is to give without needing to own, to serve without expecting servitude, to choose without requiring reciprocity as proof of worth. And that's difficult in a culture that constantly tells men their value is based on how much they can offer, perform, or achieve. But in intimate relationships, performance is hollow without presence. Sacrifice is meaningless without sincerity. This is not to say that effort doesn't matter. It does. But the source of that effort must be clean. It must come from a place of overflow, not depletion, from desire, not duty, from truth, not expectation, because a woman will feel the difference immediately. She will feel whether she's loved as a person or maintain as a possession. And that difference determines whether she leans in or starts to emotionally withdraw. So if you want to be in a relationship that thrives, where intimacy, respect, and desire are alive, you must stop keeping score. Stop waiting from a place of pressure. Stop waiting for her to make you feel worthy. Instead, give because it's an expression of who you are. Because choosing her is a reflection of your integrity, not your insecurity. And in the end, that's what she wants most, to be chosen again and again. Not because you're supposed to, but because you want to. That's where love lives. Not in obligation, but in intention. Not in keeping her, but in wanting her freely. Every day,